In campaign 2018 local matters, we're taking a look at the state of Michigan ahead of next month's primary, where voters will pick nominees for several seats. One of the most high-profile races is the one for governor. Democratic candidates will debate on Thursday. 3 people are vying for that party's nomination, while 4 are running for the Republican nomination. Earlier, my colleague DeMarco Morgan spoke with Jonathan Oosting, a politics reporter for the Detroit News.
Let's start with the state's gubernatorial race. There are a lot of candidates, of course, on both sides. Who's leading for each party's nomination?
Yeah, well, on the Republican side, the current Attorney General Bill Schuette is seemingly ahead in most public opinion polls at this point and seems to have a relatively comfortable lead. You've also got Lieutenant Governor Brian Calley running. He's right now the number 2 right-hand man of Governor Rick Snyder. And you've got a State Senator Patrick Colbeck, who's a conservative favorite, and a real outsider candidate, an obstetrician, Jim Hines of Saginaw. On the Democratic side, the presumptive favorite is former State Senate Minority Leader Gretchen Whitmer. She entered the race as the favorite and has locked up a lot of the typical Democratic endorsements from unions and labor groups. But she's facing a couple relatively strong challengers, one in Sri Tanadar. He's an Ann Arbor businessman who's pumped about $6 million of his own money into the race. And the other is Abdul El Sayed, who's the former Detroit Health Department director, who's very much running in the mold of Bernie Sanders and trying to channel the progressive momentum. Of course, Bernie Sanders did win Michigan's Democratic primary in 2016.
That's a good mix there. President Trump won Michigan by approximately 0.3 percentage points back in 2016. Would do Republican candidates want to market themselves as Trump conservatives, or would it be in their favor to distance themselves from the president?
Well, everything we've seen in the GOP primary suggests that Trump is still quite popular with the Republican base here in Michigan. So currently, I mentioned Attorney General Bill Schuette is the front runner. He's very much aligning himself with President Trump. In fact, he's endorsed by Trump and seemingly mentions that every chance he gets. He's running television ads here in Michigan that feature a clip of the president just calling him Michigan's next governor during a campaign stop here in late April in Macomb County. Conversely, Schuette is attacking Lieutenant Governor Brian Calley because Calley revoked his endorsement of Trump shortly before the 2016 election after those audio tapes surfaced of the now president talking about, grabbing women in inappropriate places. So Schuette is using that against Calley right now. It's very much a pro-Trump race in the GOP primary. The question will be whether the winner of the primary on August 7 then pivots to try and perhaps create a little distance between themselves and the president in the general election, assuming he's still relatively unpopular with the wider general electorate.
All right, we all know that the state's 8th district is a competitive race with Republican U.S. Representative Mike Bishop as the incumbent. Where does that race stand?
Yeah, well, some national pundits recently are calling this race a toss-up now. Bishop is facing a very strong challenger in the Democratic side. She still has to escape the primary, but Alyssa Slotkin, she's a former military expert, worked in the Obama administration in some capacity on foreign defense issues, and is really outraising Mike Bishop right now in the primary. She seems to have a lot of momentum and support behind her. So Bishop has won that seat a couple times now, but it's never been easy. And Democrats think that area, which is a little more affluent in northern Oakland County, but also more unionized in the Lansing area, is going to be a potential area that Democrats can flip if Trump remains unpopular heading into the general election.
All right, GOP candidates looking to unseat Senator Debbie Stabenow are debating one another Wednesday. How are they differentiating themselves?
Yeah, well, right now it's a battle of who is the most conservative in the GOP primary. You've got two outsider businessmen who have never held elected office in Sandy Pensler and John James. Both of them are closely aligning themselves with President Trump, but attacking each other for past, perhaps, marks on their conservative records. Sandy Pensler was pro-choice many, many years ago. He says, like President Trump, he's evolved on that issue and now opposes legal abortion. John James, on the other hand, claims he's always opposed legal abortion, but has a blemish on his conservative record as well, because the only campaign contribution he's ever made up to this point was a liberal Detroit City Council member. So both of them are jabbing each other pretty heavily right now, and in fact tomorrow they're going to debate for the second and final time ahead of the GOP primary in a live radio debate on a Detroit radio station.
All right, I'm sure you have checked in and gotten a pulse from the people there. What issues are most important to Michigan voters ahead of November?
Yeah, well, I mean, on the ground here, the roads are always a really important issue here in Michigan because of the unique freeze-thaw cycle here in a relatively cold state. Our roads tend to be worse off than some neighboring states, and this winter was a particularly tough year for potholes. So for gubernatorial candidates especially, roads are a big issue. Of course, the president has promised some sort of infrastructure spending bump, but that hasn't materialized yet. So the onus is falling on the state right now. Other than that, of course, jobs in the economy are always going to be a big factor. On the Republican side, a lot of Bill Schuette, the front runner for the gubernatorial election, wants to cut taxes like Trump did at the federal level. And on the Democratic side, a lot of candidates are talking more about raising wages for workers and trying to turn what's a relatively well-run economy into actual meaningful difference in people's pocketbooks.
All right, Jonathan Oosting. Jonathan, thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate it.
Thanks so much for having me.